My father's lie was so casual, so brilliantly executed, that I almost felt stupid for questioning it. His voice on the phone was the picture of paternal nonchalance, a tone he had perfected over years of downplaying things he didn't want to discuss. "Oh, it's nothing, Amelia," he'd said, the words breezy and dismissive. I had asked about a get-together I'd heard whispers of, something for my brother. Just a small family reunion for Michael and Catherine. Very low-key. You know how these things go. I did know, or at least I thought I did. My brother, Michael, and I have always existed in different orbits. It was never a war. There were no cinematic shouting matches or simmering feuds that I was aware of. We were simply built from different materials. He was the golden child, the one who meticulously followed the life map our parents had laid out for him. Good college, stable career, perfect fiancé. I was the one who always saw the side roads and felt an irresistible pull to see where they led. So, the idea of a small, intimate family event that didn't include me. It stung, sure, but it was believable. Maybe it was just for the future in-laws. Maybe it was a quiet dinner to celebrate their engagement. I talked myself into believing it, and I let it go. That comfortable illusion shattered into a million pieces the following Saturday night. I was curled on the sofa in my quiet Chicago apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window, scrolling aimlessly through my social media feed. It started not as a trickle of information, but as a tidal wave. Tagged photos, video stories, a professionally curated photo album with a custom title, Michael and Catherine's Engagement Gala. And it was not a small reunion. The first photograph that made the air leave my lungs in a single, painful gasp was a professional shot. There was my brother Michael, grinning from ear to ear, his arm locked around his fiancée, Catherine. They were posed beneath a breathtaking arch of white roses and eucalyptus, illuminated by what must have been thousands of tiny, glittering fairy lights. Behind them, a grand ballroom at a place that looked like a high-end country club was teeming with people. I started swiping, my thumb moving mechanically as my heart began to pound. I recognized every single face. Our aunts, our uncles, dozens of cousins, lifelong family friends, Michael's entire fraternity pledge class, and what appeared to be Catherine's entire family tree. There had to be well over 150 guests, all in formal wear, holding champagne flutes, their faces glowing with celebration. The lie wasn't just a lie, it was a profound insult to my intelligence. This was not a low-key get-together. This was a full-scale, no-expense-spared production, a monumental celebration of a major life event. And I was, with glaring, undeniable clarity, the only member of the immediate family who was not there. As I scrolled through more pictures, a cold, dense knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. There was my mother, her head thrown back in laughter as she chatted with Catherine's mom. There was my father, standing on a small stage, microphone in hand, giving a toast. My cousins were crammed into a photo booth, wearing ridiculous feather boas and oversized sunglasses. They all looked so blissfully happy, so utterly and completely untroubled by my absence. It was as if I had been erased. The initial hurt was sharp and visceral, but it was quickly consumed by a surge of white-hot anger. My first impulse was to dial my dad's number and unleash a storm of accusations. To demand, he explained this massive, cruel deception. But I caught myself. I could play the entire conversation out in my head before it even began. He would use his placating, gentle voice, the one designed to make you feel like you were hysterical. He would tell me I was overreacting, that it was a simple oversight, that they didn't want to bother me with the travel. He would expertly twist the narrative until I felt like the unreasonable one for being upset. I refused to give him that power. I refused to sit in my apartment, marinating in my own hurt and misery while they danced the night away. I had to do something, not for them, but for me. On a sudden, defiant whim, I flipped open my laptop. The idea came to me in a flash of pure, unadulterated clarity. I found a last-minute flight to Denver and booked a room at a ski lodge in Vail. I needed the mountains. I needed the biting cold on my skin, the thin air at high altitude, the raw physical exertion of skiing to burn away the toxic poison of betrayal and anger that was brewing inside me. I needed to be somewhere vast and beautiful, somewhere that had absolutely nothing to do with them and their carefully constructed world. The next morning, I was on a plane, watching the suburbs of Chicago shrink below. Hitting the slopes was a baptism by ice. The crisp, clean mountain air was a shock to my system, stinging my cheeks and clearing the fog from my mind. The rhythmic shush of my skis carving through the fresh powder became a kind of meditation. With every turn, with every controlled slide down the mountain, I felt a small piece of the hurt and rage flake away, left behind in the snow. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I wasn't replaying the party photos in my head. I was just there, in my body, moving through a world of white and blue. I was present. Before my last run of the day, I stopped at the summit. The view was staggering, an endless panorama of snow-covered peaks piercing a sky of impossible blue. I pulled off my goggles, my face flushed from the cold and the effort, and took a selfie. It wasn't a glamorous picture. My hair was a tangled mess from my helmet, and my nose was bright red, but I was smiling. It was a real smile, a genuine, unforced expression of pure joy. I posted it to my social media with a simple, almost careless caption. Couldn't be happier. Hope everyone's weekend is just as amazing. I honestly did not anticipate the firestorm that one simple post would ignite. I figured a few friends would like the photo. Maybe a cousin would leave a comment like, "So jealous, looks incredible." I put my phone on silent, tucked it away, and went into the lodge to wrap my cold hands around a mug of hot chocolate. It was a couple of hours later, as I sat by the fire, that I finally checked it. The screen was glowing like a live coal. Dozens of missed calls, a relentless flood of text messages. The notifications were scrolling by faster than my eyes could even process them. Dad, Mom, Michael, aunts, uncles. The family group chat was a chaotic explosion of question marks and frantic emojis. I ignored the calls, a new wave of anxious dread washing over me. But then a text from my mother appeared on the screen, stark and demanding. "Amelia, call me. We need to talk. Now." The tone was so unlike her usual texts that it sent a shiver down my spine. Something was very, very wrong. With my heart hammering against my ribs, I took a deep breath and called her back. She answered on the first ring, her voice wound as tight as a guitar string. "Amelia, what on earth are you doing? Why would you post that picture?" I was genuinely confused. "What are you talking about, Mom? I'm on a ski trip. It's a selfie from the top of a mountain. What is the big deal?" A long, weary sigh hissed through the phone. "The caption, Amelia, the caption. Hope everyone's weekend is just as amazing. It makes it look like you were left out on purpose. People are calling. Your Aunt Susan just called me, asking why you weren't at the engagement party." A bitter, humorless laugh bubbled up from my chest. Well, that's an easy question to answer. Maybe because I was left out on purpose. There was a profound silence on the other end. A long, heavy pause that stretched for an eternity. I could hear the faint sound of her breathing, the frantic whirring of her mind as she tried to assemble a defense that simply did not exist. Finally, she spoke, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "It wasn't like that, honey. We didn't think you would want to come." My stomach felt like it dropped to the floor. "What? Why in God's name would you ever think that?" She hesitated again, and I could practically hear the gears turning as she carefully selected her words. "Your brother, Michael, just thought it would be for the best. He didn't want any drama. My hands, still chilled from the snow, curled into tight fists at my sides. Drama? What drama? I haven't had a real conversation with him in 2 weeks. I didn't even know there was a problem between us. Look, she said, her voice shifting abruptly into damage control mode. We can discuss all of this later. But for right now, can you please just take down the post? You're making everyone feel very uncomfortable. People are talking. And that was it. That was the moment of absolute, chilling clarity. They weren't calling me out of guilt. They weren't calling to apologize for the lie, for the exclusion, for leaving me out of one of the most significant family events of our generation. They were calling because their perfect, polished, public image was starting to crack. They were worried about appearances. They were worried about what Aunt Susan and the rest of their social circle would think of them. My pain was a minor inconvenience. Their public embarrassment was a 5-alarm fire. The realization didn't just hurt anymore. It made my blood boil with a cold, focused rage. "No, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet and calm. "I'm not taking it down." I ended the call before she could sputter out another protest. Mere seconds later, Michael flashed across my screen. I almost hit ignore, but a part of me needed to hear it from him. I deserved a real answer. I answered the call, my voice as sharp as broken glass. Why wasn't I invited? He let out a long, exhausted sigh, the sigh of a man burdened by a problem entirely of his own creation. "Amelia, look, it's complicated." "Uncomplicate it for me, Michael." Another silence, this one even longer. I could picture him perfectly, running a hand through his impeccably styled hair, struggling to wrap the ugly truth in a package that wouldn't make him sound like a complete and utter coward. He failed. "Catherine didn't want you there," he finally mumbled, the words barely audible. The admission hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Your fiancée? Why? I've met her a total of 5 times. What could I have possibly done to her?" He paused, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was just a whisper. "She thinks you're unpredictable. She says you always speak your mind, that you don't have a filter. She was really stressed about the party, and she wanted everything to be perfect, with no tension." I was stunned into a pure, ringing silence. Unpredictable. Speaks her mind. These were the code words they used to describe someone who had a personality, someone who didn't just nod and smile and agree on cue. So that was my crime. I wasn't bland enough for my brother's shiny new life. So, because I'm not a doormat, I get excommunicated from my own brother's engagement. My voice was trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in years. "It's not like that," he said weakly, the excuse sounding pathetic even to him. "We just wanted the night to go smoothly." "Well, congratulations, Michael," I said, that bitter laugh returning. "You got exactly what you wanted, a smooth, perfect party. I wasn't there to mess it up. I really hope it was worth it." I hung up before he could offer another empty platitude. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed for a long time, the phone lying heavy and silent in my hand for a moment before it started buzzing incessantly again. It was a chorus of incoming texts from my family, all demanding that I fix the mess I had apparently created. Delete the post. Call Aunt Susan and smooth things over. Make this whole misunderstanding just disappear. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate choice. They had chosen to cut me out, and now they were angry about facing the entirely predictable consequences of that choice. My entire life, I had been the family's designated black sheep, not in a destructive or rebellious way. I was just myself. I was the one who would gently call out an uncle's casually bigoted comment at Thanksgiving. I was the one who wouldn't pretend to adore a cousin's truly awful boyfriend just to maintain a fragile peace. I didn't perform pleasantries for the sake of appearances, and for that, I was branded difficult, unpredictable. What stung the most wasn't the exclusion itself, but the conspiracy of silence that surrounded it. Not a single person, not my mother, not my father, not one of the dozens of relatives I had spent my life with, had stood up for me. They had all passively accepted the verdict that I was unworthy of an invitation. They had watched it happen, said nothing, and then went to the party. Their panic now wasn't for my feelings, it was for themselves. I took a deep breath, a sense of cold, hard resolve settling deep in my bones. I picked up my phone, my thumbs flying across the screen. I was not going to let them bury this. Since so many of my family members have suddenly remembered that I exist, I typed, I thought I should probably clear a few things up. I wasn't on another trip. I wasn't too busy. I wasn't too independent to care about my own brother's engagement party. The simple truth is, I wasn't invited. And now, instead of receiving an apology, I'm being asked by my family to stay silent so they can save face. That's not going to happen. I hit post. The reaction was immediate and explosive. My phone began to vibrate so intensely on the nightstand it sounded like it might shatter. Messages poured in. Dozens were from distant relatives and old family friends, expressing shock and outrage on my behalf. Amelia, I had no idea. I am so sorry, that is just horrible. One wrote. We asked where you were and someone told us you were home with the flu, wrote another. Then came the furious backlash from the inner circle. Texts from my parents, my brother, and a few loyalist cousins flooded in, accusing me of being petty, vindictive, and selfishly attempting to ruin Michael and Catherine's happiness. My father's message was the most cutting of all. You are making a monumental mistake. You are tearing this family apart over a party. Take that post down immediately. We will discuss this privately. Privately, that was their sanctuary. Privately was where they could control the narrative, where they could gaslight and manipulate and twist my own feelings until I was the one apologizing. I wasn't playing that game anymore. I put my phone on the nightstand, face down, and went for a long walk in the crisp, silent night. The snow crunched under my boots, the only sound in the world besides my own steady breathing. When I returned an hour later, the digital fire had grown into an inferno. My post had become a public forum. A few of my more outspoken cousins had started commenting directly on it. My cousin Grace wrote, "Wait, what? I specifically asked your mom where you were. This is not okay." Another cousin tagged my father and wrote, "Why wasn't Amelia invited? This makes absolutely no sense." The carefully constructed family facade was crumbling in real time for everyone to see. My mother called again. This time I answered. Her voice was thin and shaky, and I could tell she had been crying. "Amelia, please, why are you doing this to us? We are family." I took a deep, steadying breath. "That's funny," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "I didn't feel much like family when you lied to my face and left me sitting alone in my apartment while you all celebrated. It wasn't our decision," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Catherine was just so worried, and Michael just wanted." "Catherine is not my family yet, Mom. You are," I cut in sharply. "And you chose the comfort of a stranger over your own daughter. All of you did." She had no response to that. There was nothing she could say. "Let me ask you something," I continued, pressing the advantage now that I had it. "You're only upset right now because people found out. If I had never posted that ski photo, if Aunt Susan had never called you, would you have ever reached out to me? Would you have even acknowledged that you hurt me?" The profound, damning silence on the other end of the line was all the answer I needed. After a long moment, she let out a sound that was half a sob, half a sigh of defeat. "What do you want from us, Amelia? What will it take to make this stop?" I thought about it for a second. I wanted a real, sincere apology. I wanted my brother to admit he was a coward who hid behind his fiancée. I wanted them to understand that this was never about a single party. It was about a lifetime of being treated like a difficult but necessary afterthought. But I knew, in that moment, that I would never get any of that from them. They weren't capable of that kind of self-reflection. "I don't want anything from you," I said finally, the words tasting like freedom. "I just wanted the truth to be out there." I hung up the phone. That was the last real conversation I had with my immediate family for a very long time. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the family grapevine that the engagement party incident had created a massive schism. People were forced to take sides. Catherine, apparently, was furious that her perfect party was now forever tainted by all this drama. My brother sent a few half-hearted, self-serving text messages, which I read and then deleted without replying. For the first time in my life, I had refused to be silenced, refused to swallow my own pain for their comfort. And while it had cost me my family as I had always known it, it had also, in a strange and profound way, set me free. The months that followed were a revelation. I traveled more. I poured all that wasted energy into my friendships, into building a chosen family of people who loved me for my honesty, not in spite of it. I felt lighter than I had in years. A year later, Michael and Catherine got married. I saw the pictures online. It was another spectacular, grand affair. I was not invited, and as I looked at their perfectly posed, smiling faces, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering regret. Just a quiet, peaceful, and complete indifference. They had their perfectly smooth, drama-free event, and I had my freedom. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I had gotten the better end of the deal.